All right, it is 11 o'clock on the dot. We are so glad that you're here with us today. So whether this is your first time with us or you are a client of ours, we're so glad you're here. We're going to be going over Teams today. So hopefully this will be some good tools, and I'm so excited for Brent to be able to walk us through some stuff. But before we go through all that, my name is Ellie Snyder, and I am the Director of Marketing Automation here at Enable. And we absolutely love helping churches with their technology. It's why we do what we do. It's our passion, our purpose. So we hope today just to help you out with your ministry and specifically using Teams and engaging with your volunteers. So a lot of people start their knowledge of Microsoft Office 365 thinking it just can do maybe email and calendar. Maybe you have the app or something like that. But you may not know about all the different apps they have. And the best part is how they can all be connected. So to make sure we're all on the same page, I want to say what Teams is that we'll be going over today. So Microsoft Teams is a unified communication and collaboration platform that combines workplace chat, audio and video, meetings, file storage, and a lot more. We use it here at Enable, and I absolutely love it. So our friends at First Baptist Pasadena are going to show us how they're using Teams to engage with their volunteers. So we're going to see into their app today and go over some real life examples. Before we do begin, you can pause and rewind the webinar at any time. You can just use the icons in the bottom left of your screen. If you joined anonymously, type in the Q&A that you are here just so we know who you are. We would love to just know that it's you that joined us today. And if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box on your right side of your screen at any time during the webinar. We will get to those at the very end. And if we don't get to it because of time, we will definitely answer it and put it on the recap page that you're going to get tomorrow. So I'm going to introduce our speakers to you guys. Brent Shore is the technical director at First Baptist Pasadena, and he has been there since 2005. So he's been working alongside volunteers for a long time and has a good bit of knowledge as to what tools work when trying to engage with them. He lives in Deer Park, Texas with his wife and 2 sons. We also have Travis Phipps with us, who most of you have probably met before on a webinar. He is our Director of Technology and has been with Enable for 10 years. And we would not be able to do what we do without Travis. So we're so thankful that he's spending his time with us today. And we love Travis. And he lives in Wiley, Texas with his 2 kids. So without further ado, Travis, why don't you kick us off?
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Ellie. It is absolutely our pleasure to be here, and I am really, really excited for what Brent is going to show us today and how they're really effectively using Teams with their volunteers at their church. Before we get into the actual live demonstration where he's really going to show us their Teams experience and exactly what they're doing with it, I just wanted to talk a little bit around Teams and specifically around how volunteers or guests work inside of Teams, just to kind of give a framework from a security perspective and a what does it take to do this perspective. So the first thing to know is Microsoft Teams is available for any organization that uses Office 365. And in fact, it's actually available to you right now for free during our pandemic experience for anyone. Even if you're not actively using Office 365, Microsoft has chosen to make Teams available as a solution. So I would guess that if you're on this webinar, you're probably already using it or are somewhat familiar with Teams and the fact that you have access to it. But one question that we get a lot is, okay, well, it's great that my staff can use Teams because we already use Office 365. But what about volunteers? What about church members? What about guests? And that's available in Teams as well. And here's the best part. There's no cost for that. And there's no limit to that. So you can have an organization of 5 paid staff members, and you could have 25 volunteers join and work inside of your Teams environment with you at no extra cost. So that's a really great thing to know, especially for the smaller your church, the more likely you are to use volunteers in key roles on day-to-day, week after week things that you do. So it is important to know it's available to you and it's available for free. Any volunteer can join into your team. Microsoft does call those users guests. You've heard me use that terminology. So in Microsoft terms, anyone who's from outside of your organization that would be participating in your team, they're a guest. And from a security perspective, what you need to know is that guests have the same access as members in a team. So if you've seen any of our training or if you've used Teams before, you're hopefully familiar with the fact that in the Microsoft Teams application, you can actually be a member of multiple teams. So you might have different teams for different departments in your church or different ministries in your church, or maybe you create a team just for VBS 2020 or 2021 planning. Different projects can have teams, and you can have membership in a lot of different teams. Well, what you need to understand is when you add a guest, they get access to everything in that team. So the one thing that we like to point out to everybody is we do not recommend that you add guest users to your ministry team or to your department team. We recommend that you create a separate team to collaborate with your guests through, because by adding them into the team, you're giving them access to all of the conversations inside of that team. You're giving them access to all of the planner and OneNote and wiki information inside of that particular team. And you're giving them access to any files that you have stored inside of that team. So I would expect, if you're like most churches, you probably have conversations amongst your staff that you would not want guests or volunteers to have access to. So again, create a separate team for that volunteer engagement. Brent's going to show us he has a team for his media department internally, and then he has a team for his media department that includes his guests or his volunteers. So he'll be showing us that here in a minute. So I think that's everything I wanted to talk about at a high level. Oh, here's one other thing. I always like to make it clear to people. The other question that we get asked is, okay, but how hard is it? What do they need? So it's free, but how does it work? In a nutshell, it works like this. To log into Teams to participate, you need some kind of account from Microsoft. If you already are using Office 365 and your volunteers are already using Office 365, maybe from wherever they work, then they have a Microsoft account, and you can invite their work email address that they already use, and they can log in with that account to your Microsoft Teams experience. If maybe they don't have an Office 365 account and they just have a personal Gmail account, or they have a Yahoo email address, they can create a free Microsoft account using whatever email address they want, and then they would log in with that free Microsoft account to get access to your team. So the way it works is you invite them with an email address, and if they already have an account with Microsoft attached to that email address, they're great, they log in, they're done. If they don't, then Microsoft will happily walk them through creating that. Again, it's a free account, takes just a little bit of setup. It's no different than when they created a Facebook account or a Yahoo account or a, you name it. People are used to creating accounts online. They can have a free Microsoft account and they can participate in your team as a guest. So with all that introduction out of the way, it is absolutely my pleasure to introduce you to Brent Shore, and we're going to let Brent start to share his screen out. He is going to show us their team setup, and he's going to walk you through how they are using it and keeping their volunteers engaged at First Baptist Pasadena.
Well, hey, thanks for having me, Travis and Ellie and the Enable team. It's a pleasure to be with you guys today and to show you how we are using Teams here at First Baptist Pasadena. And give me just a second. I'm trying to fix something here on my end. All right, there we go. All right, so we are using Teams, as Travis mentioned, for our volunteers, and we also have our staff. This is actually our staff channel right here, Media Communications. And then we have a new team called FBP Media Team. That is what we call our group of production media volunteers here at the church. They are the media team. So inside that team, we have several different things. We have an audio channel, we have a lighting channel and a video channel. And of course, as every team does, we have the general channel. And as you can see here, there's actually a notification that I've got an unread message there. One of the things we like to do is we like to break down those conversations by those teams so that volunteers that are specific to lighting and video and audio can have conversations where not everybody's getting notifications that stuff's going on, or it's easier to find stuff. So in this particular team channel we're looking at right now, this is actually our lighting channel. We share just different stuff related to lighting. So it's not as active as some other channels, but there's still stuff in here. So that's kind of what we're doing there. In our general channel, that's kind of the place where it's kind of the hub for every volunteer. We have conversation going on, like we had some conversation yesterday afternoon going on. This week is our first week back for live services again. And so we had conversation about that and what the volunteers were going to need to do and all that stuff. So one of my volunteers actually asked that question, hey, what's going to happen this week? And so I replied. We have some other stuff in here, but before we get more into the general area, one of the things I want to show off is how we can use this for events. We had our Christmas production last year. As most churches do, we have a big Christmas production. Ours is called the Singing Christmas Tree. And we use teams. And this is when we kind of really came to understand the power of teams and how we could really take it and use it to help our teams find what they needed quicker. We were using several different other applications for file sharing and for task management, different stuff to coordinate with volunteers. And we said, there's got to be a better way. And we had partnered with Enable, and they had shown us teams. And we decided about a year ago, we wanted to go ahead and incorporate this for volunteer use and figure out how to use it. And so I, with some of my team, started figuring this out. We have a few volunteers that are a little more technical, so we started with them, got them incorporated in, kind of built our team up, figured all the ins and outs, and then we started pulling in everybody else. So our Christmas production was really the first time that we really dove into it. And the things that we learned that were interesting to us is that volunteers can come in and they can post and ask questions as they hit them throughout the day. So this is something that they have access to, whether they're here on site, whether they're at home, at work, wherever they're at, they can access this as something comes to them. We're in the middle of production. Our production's about 2 weeks is what it takes for us from start to finish, from getting ready to getting done. And so questions come up throughout all the time from volunteers. Hey, we're doing this. Our volunteers are a big part of our production and a big part of what we do here. And they help coordinate a lot of stuff. And so they get their documentation together. Hey, this is what we're doing and all that. And they're able to share that stuff right here with us very easily. And we get notifications. It's an application that we're already using from a staff standpoint. Our church has moved our staff over to using Teams. And because we're already doing that, it's just a one-stop shop. Makes it easy for all this stuff. But it made it specifically easy for our volunteers to get in here and work with us. Honestly, Teams took what we normally do and shortened some of the time because everything was in one location. We were able to do more tasks this last year in less amount of time because of Teams. I attribute that to Teams and just the coordination being there. Before, we have different people. Some volunteers come in during the daytime, some are at nighttime when we're doing our Christmas production. Okay, well, where are we at? What do we need to do? Instead of having to ask those questions, we were able to use Teams with the planner plugin for task management and have all the tasks there. We have over 200 tasks that have to be completed before our actual first production. And we were able to use that and put all the tasks in there of what was going on, and the volunteers could come in and see, okay, this is what's still left to be done, or this is where this task is at, because even in Planner on the task, you can comment and make comments on those tasks and have those conversations specific to that task with that task. So that's one of the neat things, that Teams has all these integrations. One of the ways that we did that and kind of coordination was we created a wiki to use we use Ableton for some of our queuing. This year was for lights. It queued lights with the songs we use Click and all that stuff. And so we did that. We have volunteers that help us actually program the lights. I program lights. We split it up. And so that's what this particular wiki right here was, just communication back and forth with, hey, this has been programmed on the console. Hey, we've tied in the cues in Ableton. Hey, I've got it marked in my book. Hey, I've got it marked in my book. Or hey, I still need to confirm the blackout cue at the end, or different stuff. And we started off with it in a wiki, and that was good. What we actually decided to go to, and one of the neat things that Teams allows, is it allows a plugin with OneNote. And so we actually created a OneNote for what we called the Tree 2019. And so that's the name of our OneNote. And when you go in here, it opens up it's a notebook, which is really cool. You click here and you can go back to your navigation panel. And so then we moved into here. We have an audio one and we have a lighting one. Those are the two specific areas that I'm over here at the church. And so we use it a lot for that. Video for our Christmas production is not as intensive as far as coordination of programming and scheduling, all that. So we didn't have to use it for video, but we could have. We just didn't have to use it. And so we moved that from the wiki into here and actually finished up with it in here. But we also had, when you're using queuing in Ableton with lights and that kind of stuff, we were actually using MIDI cues with MIDI notes. And so we had to know what note we had used and what it was used for so that we could make sure that all that stuff was queuing correctly. And so that was important to us because we can't use the same note twice or it's going to fire two different cues or different stuff. It's going to go crazy. And so that was an important thing. But we had different people. One was programming the Ableton and one was programming the lighting. And we have to communicate to each other, hey, this is the cue that I want you to use for this. And so this was our way of communicating that. And as I had volunteers, they were actually programming lights from home because with this lighting software we use, as with most lighting softwares, there's an offline version. And so this allowed us to have decisions made on site for Ableton, but then communicate to the volunteer that was at home doing some programming, hey, this is the note we're going to use for this song. And then they would program that in so that all of it would tie together. And so that was a critical piece for us. We have, again, more with Ableton is we needed to know what's coming in. We have all these different tracks. And we're using Dante, but we only have 16 channels. Okay, what's coming in on those channels? How are we coordinating that? So we know how audio knows how the guys that have programmed Ableton, where stuff's going to be coming in, because that's important from an audio standpoint. How are we passing these things? And so that was, again, another place of coordination. And so this was extremely helpful for our Christmas production last year to have all these tools in here. The neat thing and the thing that I love about Teams is that everything's in one location. As a volunteer, they can go to Microsoft Teams in the app or on the web browser. And if they're in the app, when they click on something that's up here at the top, if it's a OneNote thing, it pops up and it'll transfer you to the OneNote app on your phone. You don't even have to go find OneNote on your phone if you have the OneNote app installed. If you don't have it, it says, hey, you need OneNote. And go to your app store and download it. And then you can click it and you go to it and then it opens up OneNote. So I don't have to say, okay, now what were we using? Were we using Planner? Were we using Teams? Where was that at? I can go to Teams, know exactly where it's at, just click on it in Teams and it'll take me to the right application. There's no more guessing of, okay, was that in this application or was that in that application? It does all that for you. And it's just so, again, it makes it so much easier because you don't have to think, okay, where do I go find this at? It's already there and it does all those for you. And so that's how we used it for our Christmas production, and it was extremely helpful. It just allowed that communication with volunteers back and forth. I think we actually even used, now I'm thinking about it, we used files as well to transport stuff back and forth from volunteers to us. So you can see here, you can see who modified it last, when they modified it, the date it was up. We shared songs that, they are sound effects. Hey, here's the sound effect that I want you to use. Okay, audio volunteer takes it, puts it into the software for that. And so coordination from a staff person to a volunteer was just so much easier because we had one place to go to find all this stuff. And it's, again, just not all these different places, different mediums, making sure that they all have access to that. I give them access to this, and then it then grants permissions for the Planner, the OneNote, and all those things. And so that's how we used it really for our Christmas production for an event. And that made it so much helpful. Again, saved us some time. We really did more things. This last year was probably the biggest Christmas production as far as the different elements we've had in it. And we were ahead of schedule going into production, which for those of you that do production, you understand that's a rarity. That doesn't happen a lot. So the other way.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in on you. I have a quick question just to clarify. You mentioned that you used Planner. And you used the wiki, you used OneNote, you had files, but you mentioned that this was a simpler thing, that it gave you the ability to kind of have it all in one place. I'm just curious, what were some of those tools that you used in the past that maybe we happen to know other churches use, but you were able to consolidate into one instead of using all these other components? Oh, We got Brent muted.
I don't know how that happened. You muted me. So we were using Dropbox to transfer files before. We were using Asana for task management. And I'll be honest, the thing that I like, and I'll show it off here because I don't have my planner over here anymore. We removed it. I'll show it off here in our next planner because I have a task right now that we're working on. The thing that I love about Planner that Asana didn't have, they may have developed this now. The thing I love about Planner is you can assign to multiple people. And that's huge for us. We have multiple people that are going to work on a task together. With Asana, we couldn't assign it to, we had to say, okay, this person's the point person, but then the others didn't get assigned the task. With Planner, you can assign it to as many people as you need to assign it to. And so that's one of the things. So like for us, this is our planner. We're kind of in our general channel now. That's where we have this one. Media team tasks. This has stuff, just kind of to-do stuff that we've got going on. Things that don't have dates on them right now because we're kind of transitioning back. We had moved some stuff. We were kind of doing a Studio A, Studio B setup with this online church stuff that we've been doing lately. And so we need to put some notes. Hey, when we're done with this, we need to put this back. And we've got projects that we're working on. We just installed and upgraded our multi-purpose room. And so we've got some projects over there that we're trying to finish up and tie that system out and get that system done over there to finish off that project. And so this is just a great way for volunteers and I to communicate, hey, here's this task that we're working on, we need to do, or this particular one actually got done. We just didn't check it off. It was, change out the batteries in this, but we're trying to be more sanitary right now and careful how we're doing stuff because of the virus. And so it's, hey, give him the batteries. He's going to change them. Use gloves when you're doing it so we can keep that separation between volunteers and the preachers, or even staff and the preachers. We're doing the same thing. So I can actually check that one off right now while we're here. And so the planner has been a huge thing for us. We are also the biggest tool, and the thing that we found that was neat that we realized, one of the things we wanted to do for our volunteers was create documentation on tasks that they have that they need to do, or tasks that they may not remember how to do. Volunteers, when we're working with volunteers in a church setting, and this is typical for, I think, all churches, we have volunteers that serve every weekend. We have volunteers that serve every other weekend. We have volunteers that are only able to serve once a month. And then we have, in our particular area, we're in Houston, and so we have a lot of industry and plants and stuff. And so I have volunteers that are shift workers or that get put on shutdowns for work, and it's maybe 2 months before they're able to volunteer with us again, just due to their work and things that are going on at work. Or that can happen anywhere, really. Just life kind of happens sometimes, and you have to take some time away. Or in this specific season that we're in right now, when we were doing remote services, our crew, we kept down to a minimum. We did a lot of pre-recorded stuff, and then here recently we moved to doing it kind of more live online. But our volunteers went probably 6 to 8 weeks without touching the consoles, just kind of because, or touching the equipment, because we were pre-recording and editing the stuff and putting the services together. And so one of the things we wanted to do, what we're calling it, is the SOP, so Standard Operating Procedure. And we wanted to create a binder for each position so that if they couldn't remember, let's say, how to turn the console on, because maybe they don't turn the console on a lot because sometimes it's on when they get here, but now they need to because they didn't get turned on before they got here. They could look this up in a binder and figure out how to do this. And so one of the things that we quickly realized after we did, or as we were doing our Singing Christmas Tree production, our Christmas production, and we created one note in there, we said, we don't have to create this binder that we have to have at every physical location. We can take that binder and make it into a OneNote, because that's the beauty of OneNote, right? It kind of makes it into a binder where it has the tabs and you can look through it. And so we said, okay, well, let's do that with our SOP. And so here in Teams, every volunteer has access to Teams. We're giving them access to Teams. We still have a few that we're still rolling it out to. But most all of our volunteers have access to Teams at this point. And so we put it in here. And so I'm going to show that to you guys and just kind of show you kind of what we did and kind of how that kind of works for us. So this particular one just kind of seems to be the default one that it pulls up every time when you go to it. This particular one is turning on and off the equipment, exactly what I just referenced. And so this reminds them how to turn on the console. We put pictures in here. You can things different colors to make them kind of show out. And this particular one, my assistant is actually the one who's put most of this together. I've worked with my assistant to do this, and so I give him the credit because honestly, he's put all this in here, and I've just kind of looked it over to make sure that things are, correct in the terminology and stuff that we've used. And so he color coordinated all the different stuff with kind of how he outlined them on the pictures. So the blue kind of shows you where that power sequencer is, and the green shows the on button and all that stuff. But we were able to put pictures in here and go through step by step on how to turn the console on. We have one out front, we have one out in our back. We do production console for the broadcast room and for production for recording and that kind of stuff. And so it goes through all that. And we were able to highlight with pictures, hey, this is where this power strip is, because our consoles have redundant power supplies, so you have to turn on both of them, both power strips for it to work. And so they need to know where those are at. And so we were able to, with pictures, do that. And that was one of the things that was important for us, was to have pictures in here for this, because in our production console specifically, because of the way it's laid out, volunteers would occasionally miss that there was a second power supply. And so this picture was able to show them, hey, and I've got this error message on the console. It says the power supply has failed. Okay, well, let me go look up in here. And we actually even have, if we go back to our navigation panel, there's different troubleshooting things. Like we use Waves plugins for our sound. There's a tab for that. Just the checklist that we have. It's common when we're setting up for Sunday services, we have a checklist. These are all the things that need to be completed before service. So we took our checklist and we actually put it in here. So as they're going from front of house console to our closet where we store all of our mics, to all the different places, they can look and say, okay, I did this. Now what's the next thing that we have to do? While I'm already up here at the stage, I don't have to go all the way back to where the piece of paper is. I've got it right here on my phone, because this is a mobile app as well as a desktop app. And I can look it up right here and see where I'm at. And so that's just another beauty of it, that they're able to have the tools in their hands wherever they're at, whether they're at home, whether they're here at the church serving. And even when I've got volunteers that'll chat with me in Teams, while they're work, hey, I had this thought, what are we doing for this? And I can reply to them. And so it's just really taken our communication with our volunteers and made it more efficient, because there's access. As something comes to them, they don't have to worry about sending a group text, right? Because we all do these group texts, but then that gets old. We all say, mute that group text. I'm tired of getting, I was chatting with a volunteer yesterday. He said, yeah, I muted that group text because it started going off when I was in a board meeting. And so, that's, we don't want to do that. And so with Teams, they have just notifications that'll show up on their phone. And so it's kind of more respectful of their time too. And so that's when he said that yesterday, I was like, there's another way for me to utilize Teams to communicate with them, is they can check it as they have time, where it's not blowing up their phone because it's a text message.
That's so true.
And so this thing we've taken for this SOP, we've got it for our worship center audio, chapel, video. We've still got a couple other areas that we're still working on, but this has taken that concept of what we were going to have, where we were going to have this binder, we were going to have to print out this stuff. And then, as always, procedures change as things change, especially right now. We're all finding through this time with COVID, right? Things that we're having to modify stuff. As the government changes the guidelines, we're needing to make adjustments in volunteer areas and stuff. And so that changes procedures. So instead of having to print out a new paper, update all the binders, you go right here to OneNote, you make the change, and it's done. You don't have anything you have to print out, make sure everybody's got the binder, and then you can just drop a little note in the general section and say, hey, I had to make an update to this. Or you can chat if you use chat, because you can chat your whole team through chat. There's a function on that. And so, and honestly, that's where a lot of our conversations are having. You'll see that in our general channel, we've got some chat that's going on in there. Like I had this conversation yesterday, but then the last conversation before that in our general channel was back in May. Of course, then I had some conversation again about that yesterday. Mm-hmm. But most of my chat with my volunteers, or coordination with my volunteers, ends up being in chat, because that seems to be kind of everybody's used to chat, right? That's kind of, we all used to have the AOL and the instant messenger back in the day. And so that's very familiar to people. And so that's where a lot of it goes. But we love the Teams and being able to send notifications, like towards the front part of the coronavirus and the COVID being at home. We just say and tag the whole media team, and they all get notified. Hey, we say we're praying for them. Let us know if there's something they need. Mm-hmm. and all that, and it sends it to the whole thing, notifies them all. That's why it's got the little people thing over here, because we notified the whole team.
Yeah, that's another great point. It can be for work, but also prayer requests and just a way to connect. That's what this tool is all about. So
and just communicating with volunteers, and so that's what we love about Teams, and that's what it's been great for us. So
awesome.
Other than that, I think that's really all I have to show off on how we are utilizing Teams here at First Baptist.
Awesome, Brent. Thank you. I think seeing into the app is so helpful, and we've gotten so many great questions that we're going to get to. The first one being really just how do you add a volunteer? You know, in your example, you can see that they're in there as a guest. So Travis, I would love for you if you could walk us through how do you add guests, and then so that's kind of the first question that'll kick us off. We want y'all to leave with that. So Travis, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm working on sharing my screen and unmuting myself. I'm going to assume that things are working unless somebody tells me otherwise.
We can hear you.
Adding a guest into a team is actually the same process as adding a member or someone that's a part of your organization. You find the team that you want to add them to, and when you click the dot menu or the ellipsis menu, if you want to be really technical about it, you come here to add a member. So whenever I select add a member, I can start typing names of people that are in my organization. So if I start typing Ellie's name, she comes up because she's in my organization. But if instead I wanted to invite a volunteer or a guest, well, they're not going to auto-populate in my list because they're not a part of the organization. We don't have that shared address book. But what I can do is if I start typing an email address, and if you are a Gmail user, you might realize what I did here with this little plus symbol to create a unique email address. I can say, you know what, I want to add this person as a guest. And so if I do that and I say, well, let's add them, it says that there's a guest, and oh my goodness, sometimes this happens. So I love live demos when things don't go right. So what we got here was something went wrong. So we're just going to retry that. If you've been using Teams, especially lately, you might have noticed it's getting used a lot more. And so there sometimes tend to be a few more of these issues.
You can use my email if you want, Travis.
Well, we can certainly give that a shot. So let's try a different email address. So go for it.
Ellie, ELLEW Snyder, SNYDER @gmail.com.
Let's see if it's going to work any better with Ellie. And everybody wrote down Ellie's email address, so you can all add her to your teams as well.
All the questions you need.
Well, look at that. Sure enough, that one's going to work. Okay, so what is happening now is Ellie has received an email in her Gmail account, and it says something to the effect of, hey, Travis has added you to this Sharing Church team. You should click here to join it. So Ellie, I don't know if you've got that email handy, if we want to bother trying to share that.
I can try to forward it to you.
Yeah, if you want to forward it to me, then I can open it up and just show folks what that looks like.
Yeah.
And basically from there, she's got the option, again, to create that free Microsoft account if she doesn't already have one, or she just signs right in with the account that she already has and she's good to go. One of the questions I know that we got, because I was spying on Q&A a minute ago, so while we wait for that email, I'll answer one. One of the questions was, well, what about audio and video calling? Can a guest participate in an audio call or a video call? The answer is yes. A guest can participate in an audio call or video call. So from right inside of the Teams interface, they can actually place audio calls and video calls to you if you wanted them to do that. But also, kind of a second part to that question was, okay, well, what if I just want people to join me in a meeting, but I don't want them to have to create an account? That's totally fine. That is absolutely possible as well. The simple way to do that is when you create your meeting invite, you add them to the meeting invite. And there's two different ways you can do that. You can do that inside of Teams, or you can do that inside of Outlook. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new meeting request in Outlook, and I'm just going to drag that over here so you can see that on my screen. So this is just how I would create a typical calendar request or a meeting invitation inside of Outlook. I just said, hey, I want a new meeting. I can give my meeting a name, and then I get to say who's a part of my meeting. So I can add Ellie, right? So she told us her email address. So look, it already knows about it because I already typed it once, right? That's fancy, isn't it? I can add, let's say that I wanted to add Brent because I know he's in my list, and then we'll go ahead and add Caroline. She's helping us out behind the scenes today. So she's in my organization, and these two are guests outside of my organization. Now here's the trick. If I want this to be a Teams meeting for us to have video and audio, I just click the button right here to make it a Teams meeting. And when I do that, notice that it injects this information down here with a link to join the Teams meeting. It also gives me a phone number where people could just call in without even using the Teams app. Now, if you do not have the audio conferencing add-on license, then you won't see a phone number added. If you want the audio conferencing add-on for your account, if you're a nonprofit set up with nonprofit licensing, it's $1.60 per user per month to have audio conferencing to make that available. But you don't have to. You could totally not have this and people would just click the link. They could join in from their mobile device. They could join in from a web browser. They could join in from the Teams app. All of those things can be done without having an account of any kind or having to be added to a team. So really, those are two different experiences. There's the aspect of a guest in a team, and then there's the aspect of, hey, I'm just an attendee for a meeting.
Right.
And there's really no correlation between those two, but I know that trips people up sometimes thinking they're the same. Mm-hmm. They really are different aspects, both driven inside of Teams itself.
Great clarifier there.
And that's actually, I'll chime in here a little bit. That's actually a great question. We have utilized that functionality of Teams with our volunteers, where we've had a volunteer as a staff member. I was here, but our volunteer couldn't come because he has multiple kids and we needed to work on something. And so we actually got on a Teams call, screen shared, just like I screen shared today. I can actually grant control as well of a computer through that. And we actually worked on stuff while he was remote and I was here. And that's another just helpful tool that I didn't even think to highlight for Teams. But guests can use it, and it's an awesome feature and help.
Yeah, I will tell you, as a board member at my own church where I attend, I have been advocating strongly that always having to drive 30 minutes to get to church for those board meetings, if we could do them virtually or remotely. Many of us travel for work a lot of times and we're out of town. So engaging or having it available where we could have people on site and also joining in via Teams. I think there are lots of group meetings that happen at churches. We've proven that small groups can happen over video conferencing, right? Mm-hmm. So other types of volunteer meetings can happen this way as well.
Yeah.
Travis, I did. So I was just going to show this. So this is the email that Ellie received to her Gmail account. It just says, hey, look, Travis added you as a guest. And here you go. You can open it up and get right into it. So she would click the link, and if she didn't already have an account, that's when she would be prompted to create a free Microsoft account. But you can see that it's very visually appealing. It's very simple. So people really ought to be able to just dive right in. Mm-hmm. Brent will tell you that some folks maybe aren't quite as up to speed on how to create that Microsoft account. You might find a little bit of help needed to get some people to create that account and log in with that account. Full honesty, full transparency, I just want folks to know that sometimes that can be a little bit of a hiccup. But again, that's only required if you're adding them to participate in your team. That is not required for them to just join your meeting. So again, I just want to provide that distinction.
And to clarify too, we wanted to kind of go over the app versus the web version of Teams. And so your volunteers, if they didn't want to have to download the apps, but they had an account, they could absolutely access this in their web browser. But if they wanted it on their phone, what Brent was saying before, so many of us are doing this from our phones these days. So the apps are free, have them download it. It would just work exactly like any other communication tool that they use. Right, guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct.
Yeah, in fact, Brent, we didn't talk about this, but Brent, almost all of his volunteers are using it pretty much exclusively from their mobile device, from their phones.
Yeah, the majority of the volunteers are using the mobile apps. I've got a couple that are using the desktop app, but that's just because I've got a couple of volunteers that travel with a laptop. Because of their day jobs, they normally have a laptop with them all the time just because of what they do for work. And so they're using it from a laptop, but the rest of the volunteers are using it from their phones, from the mobile apps.
That's great. Well, we got some awesome questions. We're going to dive right in. Marvin is asking, how many staff and volunteers does the media team include? I think this is to you, Brent.
Okay.
He says, I see 6 guests. Are all of those volunteers?
So a guest is a volunteer. As a staff member, we actually show as a regular member. So I saw where he's seeing that at on one of my teams. It shows the 6 guests up there. What it doesn't show is it doesn't show all the members and stuff that are there as well. And that particular one has 6 guests. We have some others that have more. And so, as far as our size of our volunteers and our staff is, we have 4 full-time and 1 part-time person right now in our media and communications staff. The communications is kind of separate when it comes to this team. We have one person that's our communications director, and so he doesn't directly interface with our volunteers. And then we have our volunteers, we're currently at about 42 volunteers, and not all of them are integrated into teams. Just like our camera ops aren't inside teams. They don't coordinate in teams because as a camera op, there's not really anything for them to coordinate with us. We use Planning Center for all of our scheduling, and so a lot of their communications through there. But the other areas like sound and lighting and some of the more involved areas where there's more stuff, it's a little more technical, they're using the Teams app. But we can still have meetings, again, as Travis said, with all of them through Teams if we choose to.
Sure. Okay, great. If something comes up in either an email or an event in Teams, is there a way for it to notify you by email or some other way? I don't always have it open.
So Teams has notifications built into the application itself, both the mobile and the desktop, and even the browser version if you choose to use that. If you don't have one of those open or you don't have those notifications configured maybe on your mobile device to pop up, it depends on what the thing is that you've missed. So if it's an event, that calendar is actually, the calendar inside of Teams is synchronized to your calendar in Outlook. Now, if you're a volunteer, then of course that wouldn't be the case. So you would need to handle that or manage that separately if that's what you were doing. For the, it says if an email comes into Teams, well, Teams isn't really for email, but Teams is for messages. So you would have chats or conversations that maybe you were tagged in. Those would be things that would prompt or cause a notification in Teams. If you miss one of those, Microsoft will email you to let you know you've missed it. So for instance, if someone sent me a chat message, in fact, I've had a couple of chat messages come in during this webinar. If I don't ever go acknowledge them or go look at them, within the next few hours, I'm going to get an email from Microsoft that just says, hey, there's some activity in Teams since the last time you were there. And so it kind of gives me a pointer to go back and take a look.
Yeah. And honestly, for some of my volunteers, that's actually how they find out. They don't open Teams and have it open all the time. Like I can see right now, I can see volunteers that aren't online in Teams right now because it tells me online away just like it does for staff. And then there's some that have the little X, which means Teams isn't open. And so for some of my volunteers, they get the email and that's how they know, hey, I need to go check Teams. Brent's posted something or there's something going on. And so that's actually how some of my volunteers see the notifications. But then I have some, because of their other job, or whatever their day job is, they actually operate in Teams for their job. And so they're already there. And so they see those notifications instantly.
And to clarify for that, you can just, if you're on the app, you just go into your settings and there's settings and then notifications. And then if it is on your phone, I kind of get confused with this. So I'm a non-technical person. So you can have your notification settings inside the Teams app, also notifications on your phone. So, you have to have them both turned on, right? To have them sent to your phone.
Well, no, you get to decide. That would be the way I would describe it. On your mobile device, you can set what notification preferences you have for your mobile device. On the desktop application, you can set what notification preferences you have for the desktop experience.
Got it.
And actually on the mobile, one of the options is, hey, if you're active in the desktop, don't notify on mobile. I love that one because I sit here at my desk in Teams. I don't really want it notifying me in both places all the time.
Right.
So it only actually notifies on my phone whenever I'm not active in Teams on my desktop.
Exactly. And that's a great point. Didn't mean to confuse anyone there with my non-technical skill set there. I'll let the professionals keep answering the questions. Okay, this is a great question. Adoption of Teams is always a challenge. What did you do, Brent, to you? What did you do to encourage and promote the use of Teams?
So the way I started with teams is I started with volunteers that I knew would engage in teams. Those that are probably a little bit more technical, to get them in there, to get me used to engaging with volunteers. Because part of it is not just getting them used to, it's getting us used to changing our mindset. I have this application now, this tool that I can use to communicate. And so a lot for us was just getting that mentality and mindset going to where we could do that. And so I started with the ones that were most technical to help me learn that experience. And then once we felt like we had worked through, because it was our first time in teams for volunteers. So we worked through with Travis on some of the things about guests and different things, different things that came up. Because for FBP, we hadn't really used Teams even as a staff yet. And then I was trying to go ahead and let's expand and use this because I sat through one of Enable's webinars and I saw, hey, Teams, well, that's cool. Oh, I can use that this way. And that's kind of how I got into Teams, was just from watching one of the webinars. And so we started off with that, and then we transitioned. Once we had that down, I said, okay, we've got this down. We know how to troubleshoot it for everybody. Then we expanded to adding everybody else in. And I started off with, again, those teams that were going to utilize it the most. I started off with all my audio team. Every audio volunteer has been added into Teams. And then I started from there adding other volunteers that needed to engage in Teams. And so that's kind of how we started off in it. And then as far as engaging and promoting them to use it, it's just continuous. Same with any other app. When we were doing Asana, it was the same. It's the same thing. We just have to say, hey, we're using this. Can you go check this? And Planning Center and all the different stuff that we use. It's just getting them used to it. And it's a process. But once we got into it, they found it so much easier that I don't really have to encourage. I've got volunteers now. Matter of fact, somebody just sent me something on my team right now. But I've got volunteers now that'll say, "Hey, I really like this today," and that's that's the cool thing is that they're not even using it when they're serving; they're using it outside of times when they're serving. They just may be attending service as a regular worshiper. They say, "Hey, I noticed y'all did that today. I really love the change for video. We switched lower thirds," and that's one particular case. Just kind of commenting in and encouraging each other, and so it really has kind of taken its own once we got them into it. And so it really was not hard to get them in and get it promoted and get them using it. They really adapted very quickly.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the technology, once you found the fit and found the value, now your volunteers see the value, and it's helping strengthen and build the community of your volunteer team even more and keep them connected even when they're not serving together, which I think is awesome as well.
Yeah, no, it's for sure made it where we can communicate better and have that community.
This is another question in the same line of engagement. Do you have a staff person, Brent, who's like the champion for Teams, who manages and promotes it, who helps with onboarding and all that?
Yeah, I am for FVP, I'm the undeclared champion, I guess, for Teams and the point person when people have questions on how to use Teams. Just because I'm the staff member that adapted Teams the earliest. Yeah. Before we rolled it out to all staff, we started using it in our department, saw the value in it. Again, after watching an Enable webinar early on, when I guess about a year or so ago, I was like, well, that'll really change what we're doing. We're using this tool. I just saw the value in moving to it. And so we moved to it, started using it from a staff standpoint and volunteer standpoint at the same time. And then honestly, after we'd been doing that, then the whole entire staff has moved over to it. And that's actually been, when did we do that, Travis? Like in February, our whole staff moved to Teams?
Yeah, I like
Which was perfect timing, right, as the COVID came.
We saw the pandemic coming. No, that is not true. We had been talking about it for months, and so Brent and his team had adopted it and started using it, and then we were continuing to recommend to leadership that, hey, we should move everybody to this, and we should look at getting rid of the file server and move all of your file sharing into this. So we did that training right at mid to late February, right before everybody had to go work from home. And so, yeah, So what I would say is, yes, Brent is kind of the de facto guy. He's the techie guy on staff, so everybody kind of goes to him for technology things anyway. But also his leadership has really adopted and really feels the desire to better use technology and use some of these more modern tool sets. So I give a lot of credit, to Pam and some of the other leaders that also have pushed and said, no, this is the way we need to go. We need to use these tools.
That's great. I think that's such a great point that you guys are experiencing, right now. It's a real thing of trying to get people to actually use it. So I love that y'all have seen success with that, Brent, with your team and with your volunteers.
Hey, we missed a question that I wanted to jump back to. We kind of talked about it a little bit, but I want to clarify. The question was, can guests schedule and initiate a video conference call? Not exactly. Guests cannot schedule meetings and invite other people to meetings inside of Teams. So if you're wanting to schedule a meeting and invite people and that kind of thing, that has to be done by someone with an actual account in the organization. Guests can initiate direct calls or video calls to individuals or even a group of individuals through the chat experience, but they cannot schedule a meeting ahead of time. That has to be done by a staff person.
Got it. That's great to know. I thought we had already addressed that one. That's why I skipped it. So my bad. Thank you for noticing that, Travis.
Yeah.
That's a really great point that is definitely everyone needs to know that. This one asked, you showed how many files you have in Teams. Is there a size limit per file, and is there a max file storage size?
That's a Travis question.
Oh, come on, Brent.
I don't know if there's a file size. I feel like there is.
So there is a file size limit in Teams, and now I'm on the spot because it actually just increased recently. I'm going to use the number 15 gigabytes, but I believe it's actually even larger than that now. There was at a time a limit of 15 gigabytes for an individual file, but it is larger than that. Here's the caveat I will give you. If you are trying to interactively work with or share back and forth files that big that have to upload and download from any cloud solution, the user experience isn't going to be phenomenal. Now, if it's hey, I've done it one time, we're going to post it up there, and then we can download it a couple times, that'll totally work. I want to say it increased to 50 gig, but man, I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to get told that I'm wrong somehow. But it was 15. I know it's bigger, but I couldn't tell you exactly. As far as total size, this is something really important to know. The total size of available space inside of your team, inside of your Microsoft tenant in Office 365 is going to be different for each organization. It is based upon how many user accounts you have. And I will get this wrong, so I'm not even going to try to say the numbers. What I will say is that you do start out with 1 terabyte of capacity for your full organization, every organization, even with just one account. And then each user that you add, each account that you add, adds additional capacity. I can't remember what it is. It has changed a few times. If you are an administrator in your Office 365 tenant, you can go into the SharePoint Admin Center. Yes, I said the SharePoint Admin Center. Mm-hmm. The dirty little secret is that all of the file storage that happens in Teams is actually SharePoint on the back end. Mm-hmm. So you go to the SharePoint Admin Center and you'll be able to see how much total space you have. And by default now that automatically gets allocated amongst all your different teams.
Great. Cool.
So quick search, Travis shows that it's now 100 gigs for the file upload.
Thank you, Brent.
I don't know why you would need to upload a 100 gig file to Teams, but
just in case.
There you go.
We got you covered. So Marvin asked another great question. We have some members who belong to a team at work and the team's desktop only allows one count open. Share how guests can open 2 or more teams at the same time. And he said, and pin the second window to the taskbar. And how does that work on a Mac? So there's a lot there.
I love it when we have IT people on these calls. They get so deep. All right. I don't know that I have all the answers to everything that Marvin is asking for. So if Marvin has the answers, please jump in, my friend.
Which Marvin can share.
Well, yeah, but not on a webinar. We can't have Marvin share a screen, but he can chat with us. He can tell us.
Yeah.
So let me do this. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Are you sure you want to share? Well, yes, that is exactly what I want to do. So I'm going to share my screen again. Now, I am using the browser version of Teams right now because it's hard for me to webinar in one and then anyway. Just know that it is very similar of an experience. So in the browser version, up here in the top right next to my face, I've got a little drop down that says enable. Whenever I click on that drop down, you'll notice that I happen to be a guest in other organization team accounts. So I can flip to one of these other organizations as a guest, and then I can participate in them. So what we typically find folks doing is if they really need to be actively participating or watching two different organization teams at the same time, they might use the desktop application looking at one of their organizations and then use the web browser looking at another one. And so then you could have a shortcut maybe that would, pin to your taskbar or on your Mac if you wanted to do that. But the way you do it natively in the application is you do have to switch between them. If you're familiar with Slack, it's a similar experience where you're a member of different Slack communities, and then you can flip to the different communities and view the different channels. Teams is set up very similarly.
That's great.
Yeah. I'm assuming my volunteers that are doing that are using the desktop app and then a web browser for the other. It's kind of what I'm assuming they're doing.
Great.
Just because that's what I feel like they're doing because they're that technical.
We got another question for you, Brent. Are you using Teams as your phone system right now? And what are your thoughts on that?
We are not really using Teams as a phone system. I will say that we're using it a lot in staff. We're having a lot of meetings via Teams. We actually have a department kickoff meeting every morning where we're using Teams as our conference call solution, essentially. So I will say this is a neat thing that we've done that I'll share. So I was recently in quarantine. I had exposure to the virus. And so I was not able to come to work for about 3 weeks due to our policies and how we're doing stuff around here. I actually got sick, not with COVID, but so I was out a little bit. One of the neat things we were able to do through Teams is I was actually able to be here in person, virtually, and lead my team through Teams with Teams being connected into our intercom system. And we had a webcam in the room and a microphone so I could hear real time what was going on in the room and then lead our team, say, okay, let's unmute this mic and let's get ready to do this and coordinate our services while sitting at my study at my house.
Wow.
So that's a neat way that we use to interact with volunteers recently during this time as well. And my boss actually, he went on vacation. Our policy is if you go out of state, you quarantine for 14 days. And so he also did the same thing. And so it's been real neat to use Teams as our way to get in. And I know there's other applications, but for us, Teams, it's the application that we already use for everything else. And it was so simple to set it up to where we could have that interaction and engage with volunteers through Teams in a way that, honestly, I don't know. It's probably not what Teams was meant for, but it has sure enabled us to engage with volunteers in a completely different way that we didn't expect.
That's hilarious. We've heard of telehealth, and now we have teleproduction.
Teleproduction. Yeah. So it was fun.
I want to see Brent bot. I want to see what that looked like.
Well, yeah, there was one comment one day. Yeah, he's not even here, and he's still telling us what to do.
That's awesome.
Well, it was fun. It was a real neat way to use Teams.
Yeah.
And we were able to do it.
Oh, sorry, Brent.
Just that I said it's neat. We were able to do that, and so.
So I would love to just answer David's question about using Teams as a phone system. While First Baptist Pasadena does not, they already have a great voice over IP solution in place. We at Enable do internally use Teams as our phone system for many of our staff. And then we have helped many churches make that transition to using Teams as their phone system. And it really is great having that integrated experience because now everything that you've already seen and used inside of Teams, it just has a native kind of extension to, hey, when somebody calls my phone number, well, Teams rings. Just like it does when somebody Teams calls me internally. And whenever I want to place a call, I just go to the calls app and dial the phone number on the little digital dial pad, and ta-da, it places the call through Teams. And the mobile experience for that is incredible, because now my work phone number is with me wherever I am. So whenever I need to call a client, or if I need to call a volunteer, I'm calling from my work phone number, but from my mobile device. And so when people call me, it does ring on my mobile device or the desktop. It really is a great experience.
That's awesome.
And so, David, if you have any other questions about that, hit us up. I'm sure the ladies will share in a minute, but info@enable.email is the best way to reach us. We'd love to get in contact. We'd love to put you in contact with other churches that are doing it. Talk turkey and see what works for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, I was just kind of scanning this Q&A here.
We are out of time, Brent, but I want to be conscious if it's a quick little 30-second.
Yeah. So I'm just scanning Q&A here. This is one thing that I was going to mention when Travis did it. So there was a question about names and naming people when you're importing people. They did a bulk update and pulled people in. It is important to know when you're pulling in volunteers into teams that you need to make their name you first put it in. As you're adding them, sometimes as you put in emails, it kind of pulls the name in weird. That you need to name them as a guest when you first put them in. So Bob Smith or whatever the name is. Otherwise, you have to go to your admin and they have to do it on the back end, and it's a lot harder. And so that's something that we learned. And there was a question related to that, so I did want to kind of touch on that because that was one of the things we learned throughout this process as well.
That's a great thing. I know we're out of time to all the questions, but we're going to have Travis and Brent answer them in our recap. So you will all get an email. Anyone that's registered is going to get an email with the recording, and we do the live Q&A questions at the very bottom of that. So we're going to get Brent and Travis to answer the 5-6 questions we didn't get to today. So be on the lookout for that. So we just thank y'all for being here today. Brent, thank you especially for taking the time to do this and show us into your app. It was awesome. I know it was so helpful for people to see real examples. We have more resources on Office 365. So if you have any questions on how to use Teams or any of the apps we talked about today, and then like someone mentioned the phone system, that is something we're learning and we're producing more content around as well. Go to enableministry.com/Office 365. You'll see all of our resources that we've pulled together, whether it's one-pagers or blogs or webinars. And then also visit enableministry.com/webinars for our upcoming webinars we've got going on. And like Travis said, email us. You can find all of our contact information on our website. But we would love to continue helping you guys, and we just appreciate y'all being on today. And again, Travis and Brent, thank you so much. With that, I will sign off, and we'll see y'all next time.